Welcome everybody to the March 18th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting. I'm Ruth Davis Rogers, the Planning Commission Administrator. Tonight we have two public hearings scheduled. All hearings were duly advertised and the certificate of publication is part of the record for each hearing. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting, allowing for both virtual and in-person participation. Citizens are invited to provide comments on any or all of the hearings after each presentation has concluded. Each of the hearings will have a separate comment period followed by a brief presentation. Anyone here in person who wishes to speak must sign in on the sheet located on the table as you enter through the door. This meeting is being recorded on both audio and video for record-keeping purposes. At this time, I'll hand the meeting over to Mr. Toohey.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening. Welcome to the Calvert County Planning Commission public hearing. I'm going to take attendance in order to establish a quorum. Commissioner Berry? Here. Commissioner Freeland?
Here.
Commissioner Gadway?
Here.
Commissioner Kernan?
Here.
Commissioner McQueen?
Here.
And Commissioner Weems?
Here.
We have full attendance. We have a quorum. We are now called to order. If you'd all please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is a presentation by staff by Tay Harris, the Division Chief of Long Range Planning.
Good evening. I'm Tay Harris. I'm the Long Range Planner for the Department of Planning and Zoning. It's nice to see you all this evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
So the first item on the public hearing is for the Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan, March 2026 draft. This is Chapter 2 of the Master Plan of Town Centers. On July 16, 2025, the Planning Commission determined that Chapter 2 is consistent with the Calvert County Comprehensive Plan. On September 30, 2025, December 2, 2025, and January 13, 2026, the Board of County Commissioners held a public hearing and two public hearing continuances to discuss the build-out status of Symphony Woods and Calvert Town subdivisions, mitigation language associated with adequate public facilities for roads, the approval time for incorporating employment-centered zone parcels into the town center, the development potential of employment-centered zone parcels, definitions and permitted uses in the town center and employment center districts, and remanding Chapter 2 to the Planning Commission to consider consistency with the comprehensive plan. On February 18, 2026, Planning and Zoning staff requested feedback from the Planning Commission on the alternative Prince Frederick Town Center proposed districts map. The map proposes rezoning employment-centered zone parcels for inclusion in the town center, changing the designation from suburban traditional to edge commercial. The intent of the Edge Commercial District is to allow uses that minimize impacts to infrastructure and environment and other ecologically valued natural resources land while remaining consistent with the intent of town centers. Other proposed revisions since the beginning of February are found on page 41. Here it states that the Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan update maps are listed in Appendix C of the Master Plan and also may be found on the county's website. On page 36, included in strategic directions for the Town Center Master Plan, Huntingtown Creek headwaters protection through zoning and raised awareness of its ecological value was added to number 7. On page 48, in the context of the discussion for
excuse me, you want to flip your slides? Or
On the PowerPoint.
on the PowerPoint?
Yes. Thank you, Tamara. Okay, so then on page 48, in the context of development in the pipeline and development capacity in the town center, this statement was added in 2025. The Board of County Commissioners adopted the Calvert County zoning ordinance, significantly reducing the allowed density. On page 51, added to the intent for the commercial edge district is minimizing impacts to sensitive areas and other ecologically valued natural resources land in addition to existing infrastructure. Additionally, statement about Mill Creek impervious surface in the watersheds were added, and it includes Mill Creek, a major tributary to the Hunting Creek, drains into the western part of the Prince Frederick Town Center, including the proposed Edge Commercial District. In 2023, developed land in the Upper Mill Creek watershed accounted for 38.8% of the area, including 14.6% impervious surface. As previously discussed, when impervious surface exceeds 10% of a watershed, stream ecosystems begin to show signs of distress. Mill Creek watershed is currently stressed as evidenced by benthic macroinvertebrates and eDNA sampling in 2023. To prevent further degradation of the Mill Creek subwatershed, it is vital to minimize new impervious surface and enforce effective sediment control compliance during construction and stormwater management to treat runoff. Does anyone have any questions?
Gentlemen?
Just a comment, Tay, just to twist some words around. In regard to the Mill Creek section there, it really should read that Prince Frederick Town Center drains into Mill Creek, not Mill Creek draining into Prince Frederick.
I can make that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Gentlemen, any other questions or comments?
One comment, just thanks very much for adding the Mill Creek language. A lot of constituents were concerned about that. I think it's a key issue, so thanks very much.
Yes. Okay. Whoops. So in conclusion of the public hearing, these are your options. After the conclusion of oral testimony, just decide whether to keep the record open for receipt of additional written testimony or close the record. Options include close the record the night of the public hearing, which is tonight, and after the conclusion of public testimony, or keep the record open for a set amount of time, for example, 1 week or 2 weeks. You may close the record, you may discuss the comments and the proposed amendments, and then you may vote on the proposed amendments regarding the adoption of the plan. We do have one person signed up to provide comment.
Tay, before we get there, is there any questions from the Planning Commission or agencies?
Were there any other questions, gentlemen? Where's that? Thank you, Ted.
Bob Estes has signed up to provide public comment.
He's on his way.
There we go. I learned that a long time ago. Anyway, I'm also very happy about the Mill Creek being adopted. The creek kind of runs between the backyard of some of the areas there. I'm sorry, but I do have a problem with my brain, and it's something I have trouble with. So I'll do the best I can. And then on the other side is a senior center, and the Friends of Hunting Creek have done a lot of work in that area in between. As a matter of fact, we have a plan. We're hoping to get some grant money to actually take care of that creek, because right now it's heavily damaged, And there are ways to restore it such that the water, instead of going into an area that just keeps on eroding and eroding, there are things we can do to raise that up so that it goes into a wetland. And we all know that how valuable wetlands are. They're not just swamps like everybody used to think, but it's a great way to get rid of excess pollutants, as I think you all know, and the wildlife also seems to like it. So we're very happy, and we're hoping we get to do that as it'd be a good demonstration, and something that could be applied to other places, perhaps in the county. So thank you.
Hey,
And
Bob,
thank you
before you
adding
leave, Bob, we all know who you are. For the audience watching online,
I'm Bob Estes,
Thank
and
you.
everybody knows me. No. Anyway, any questions? Oh, that's right, I'm not allowed to ask you questions.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you, Mr. Bury.
Okay, do you have any more speakers?
No more speakers.
Do we have anyone online?
Is there anyone online who wishes to speak?
Nope. Okay.
All right, does anyone, so do you all have any other questions, or would you like to make a decision based on the recommendations and the conclusions in the slide?
Gentlemen, how do you feel?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
move
sir.
that we close the record and find that draft master plan of Town Centers Chapter 2, Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan is consistent with the county comprehensive plan and recommend adoption by the Board of County Commissioners.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any against?
Nay.
We have one against.
And who might that be, please?
Nay.
That is Commissioner Gadwell.
Gadway.
Gadway, sorry, sir. It's been how many years? Okay. Want to move on to the next one?
Okay. Yes, again, I am Tay Harris. I'm the long-range planner for the Department of Planning and Zoning. And tonight we are holding a public hearing continuance for the Dunkirk Town Center Master Plan, March 2026 draft. This comprises chapters 1 and 3 of the Master Plan of Town Centers. On November 19th, 2025, the Planning Commission presented the revised draft chapters of the Master Plan of Town Centers. The Department of Planning and Zoning presented to the Planning Commission the revised chapters 1 and 3 of the Master Plan of Town Centers. On December 17th, 2025, the Planning Commission discussed proposed revisions based on public, departmental, and agency comments and directed staff to hold a public hearing. On February 18th, 2026, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the draft chapter and discussed comments received from December 2025 through the beginning of February 2026. At the public hearing, and this slide says hearing continuance, that is incorrect. At the public hearing, the Planning Commission requested staff to report on the Dunkirk Park and Rides capacity to accommodate additional commuter bus routes to Annapolis, Greenbelt, New Carrollton, and College Park. This is a recommendation in the plan, and I'd like to note that the county is encouraging MTA to establish the routes for which MTA currently has not committed. The Planning Commission also asked staff to verify the build-out status of the MTA Park and Ride, confirm its ownership status, is it owned by the county or state, and describe the process for review by the county. So the MTA Park and Ride is built out to capacity. It is state-owned and county-maintained. The county reviews any proposed renovations or modifications to the site during the grading permit approval. And state and county design and construction requirements are generally the same. Does anyone have any questions about that feedback?
Gentlemen? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so we do not have anybody signed up here to provide public comment. I don't know, is there anyone online?
Is there anyone online who wishes to provide public comment on this item? No one's raised their hand.
All righty. Were there any other questions or comments then?
Okay, so in conclusion, the recommendation is to hold the public hearing tonight, which we are doing, and after the conclusion of oral testimony, decide whether to keep the record open for the receipt of additional written testimony or close the record. These options include close the record, keep the record open for a set amount of time, 1 week or 2 weeks, or close the record, discuss the comments and the proposed amendments, and then vote on the proposed amendments regarding the adoption of the draft plan.
Thank you, ma'am. Gentlemen, would anybody like to comment or make a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move that we close the record, find the draft master plan of Town Centers Chapter 1, Town Centers, and Chapter 3, Dunkirk Town Center Master Plan are consistent with the Calvert County Comprehensive Plan and recommend adoption by the Board of Calvert County Commissioners.
We have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye. No.
And we have one no. Okay.
Correct.
Yes. All right. 6-1. Thank you so much, staff.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your help tonight.
Okay, very good. And so now we move to public comment. Is there anybody out in the audience that would like to speak? If so, come up to the mic and speak your name. Okay, never mind. We're going to hold public comment at the end of the regular meeting, not at the end of
Thank
this
you so
meeting.
much.
Thank you.
All
Okay.
right, then. I would need a motion to adjourn this special meeting.
Motion to adjourn public hearing today's date.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. There's no reason for us to take a break, is there? No. Well, brief enough. Everybody all right? Staff? You're fine. Okay, in that case, we'll go straight into the,
One moment, please.
yes, ma'am.
I have to reload the other meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, in that case, welcome to the Calvert County Planning Commission regular meeting of Wednesday, March 18th. We all have already determined a quorum, so the meeting is now called to order. We have pledged allegiance. I'm going to take action on the proposed agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
We have
Second.
a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Action on proposed summary of actions from the February 18th public hearing. Need a motion to accept?
Move that we approve and adopt the summary of actions for February 18th, 2026 public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we also have the regular meeting that took place on February the 18th, the summary of actions. Someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve that as well. Thank you.
Second. You're not leaving. I'm keeping you here. Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Would
thank
you like to recognize the staff and
I
guests?
certainly would. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so I would like to recognize the people attending the meeting tonight. Representing Calvert County Planning and Zoning, we have Jason Brinkley, the Director. We have Tamara Blake Wallace, Deputy Director and Board of Appeals Administrator. Rachel O'Shea, Deputy Director of Zoning. Beth Rimmer, Division Chief of Zoning and Permitting. Tay Harris, Division Chief of Long Range Planning. We have, let's see, Amelia, is Amelia here? No. We have Colleen Brumick, Planner 3, Environmental. We have Katie Strauss, Planner 1. Oh, and we also have Jay Cousineau, Planner 3, Development Review. We have Becky Parkinson, Planning Commission Clerk. And virtually we heard, but I don't see her, that Kathy McAdams, Business Retention Specialist from Department of Economic Development, will be here, as well as our legal counsel, John Mattingly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so that brings us to major subdivisions for final review and action. None. Number 7, applications for site plan review and action. None. 8, major subdivision applications for preliminary review and action. None. Long-range planning. Number 9, none. And then items for discussion and or action. We have proposed text amendments to the Calvert County zoning ordinance. We have Rachel O'Shea and Beth Rimmer. And Jason Brinkley.
Moved around on you a bit. You want the clicker?
Good evening, Commissioners. Rachel O'Shea, Deputy Director of Zoning. This evening, we have a text amendment 26-23, proposed data center conditions. Background and purpose. At the Board of County Commissioners' regular January 28th meeting, staff was directed to draft additional conditions for data centers as a text amendment. Staff presented a draft text amendment on February 10th and was further directed to come back with additional options for further discussion.
Rachel, can you speak into your mic a little more, please? Thanks.
Staff returned to the BOCC to present options for consideration on March 10th and was directed to request Planning Commission feedback. So first, we'll just review the current set of conditions for the data center use. They include: the data center shall be set back 200 feet from all property lines and 400 feet from any lot or parcel with a residential building or active residential building permit, except for adjacent properties under common ownership. Primary building facades shall include at least 2 of the following treatments: fenestration, recesses in the building facade to avoid a continuous unbroken plane, or changes in building material, pattern, texture, color, or accent materials. Any noise generated by the data center, including any accessory mechanical equipment, must comply with Chapter 80 of the Noise Control Ordinance of the Calvert County Code.
Can I ask, and sorry for the interruption, do you want to take questions now as they arrive from each slide, or hold till the end?
Whatever the commissioners
Okay.
would prefer.
First, I know just looking at social media that there is a lot of public concern about the overall approval process for data centers. So I wonder if I can ask Planning and Zoning and perhaps the county attorney for clarification about what the Planning Commission's role is in approving a data center project if a serious project proposal goes forward.
I'll be happy to take that. Jason Brinkler, Director of Planning and Zoning. The approval process is the same as it would be for any other large project. It's got to go through site plan and subdivision approval if a subdivision is required. And then at the concept or right after the concept phase, going into detailed site plan, it would come before you guys under detailed site plan for review. I think later tonight we'll actually have a short summary on the current process. So that may be a good thing to stick around for, because I know we're talking through our process. I know previously it had been at concept. We've changed that in the last several months to have it at detailed, so you guys can see more details of what is being proposed. The one thing that's a little bit unique, and Rachel, I think, will hit on it at the very next slide, is that prior to coming to Planning Commission, any applicant wanting to do this would have to host a public meeting in the precinct, in the election district, where the project is being proposed. And they've got to do that at least 30 days before the meeting here. So that was an additional informational meeting or something that would have to take place.
Excuse me. Does the meeting that they have scheduled on the 28th apply to that?
Mr. Chair, I'm glad you asked. I was literally about to hit on that.
I figured you
So
might.
just for
You're so
good. Because I know there's a lot of confusion out there, no projects have been submitted to Calvert County Planning and Zoning. We are or Calvert County, period. We are aware that there have been applications submitted at the state, I think, regarding some issues with wetlands or steep slopes or something that is beyond our purview at the local level. And that's really a prerequisite before you submit anything to us when it has those impacts. But nothing has been submitted to Calvert County for review, for view, for consideration, and anything that would be has to go through the exact same process as anything else. And to the point of the informational meeting, that has to be done after submission. So I believe AWS is hosting a meeting here next Thursday, and I think that's a good thing for the public to be aware of and find out information from AWS specifically. But that does not satisfy this. So if anything is ever submitted, it would have to still do this step, because that has to be done after they actually submit a project to Calvert County. And that may clarify.
Outside of
this is beyond
the application process.
This is just an informational session or a public. I don't know how they're framing it. I think they're actually framing it as an open house that AWS is putting on. That is nothing to do with the submission process itself.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And that will be held at Calvert Middle School.
And if I can ask for just further clarification, if a site plan were to come before the Planning Commission, there are only certain criteria that we can evaluate that against. And one, as I understand it, and please correct me, is whether the site plan conforms to the comprehensive plan, and whether it also adheres to all relevant state and county regulations.
You are correct.
Okay, am I missing anything?
No, just want to highlight part of the reason why we're here tonight is the directive given from the BOCC to consider these amendments.
Sure.
One point to note, we actually broke this out into two separate items. We'll have a few other amendments to talk about after this. But the reason why it's broken out is because the BOCC wants feedback on this more so than ready to move forward. The plan is to move forward with the next 20 or so amendments that we'll talk about after this that are not data center related. Right. We want to solicit feedback. We want that feedback from you all, and then we'll come back here next month. It's the plan. To come back next month to talk about that feedback we've received, and then submit a report to the BOCC on this is what feedback we've heard before they move forward. And I know there's conversation happening about a moratorium that may or may not stop this. That is we're just doing as we're being directed. So I know the BOCC is currently I think the motion a couple of weeks ago was to start that process. I think there's going to be some additional discussion at the BOCC level in the next week or two or three on that. So they're two separate things at the moment. So just wanted to try to clarify that a bit. We're being asked to move forward with these amendments to consider and to generate that feedback from you all and from public that might have feedback to offer as well.
Okay. And one last question. So we're being asked tonight to look at certain proposed text amendments having to do with data centers. And whatever we do tonight does not prejudge whether there may be additional text amendments to be proposed in the future as county debate on this issue goes forward, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
Thanks.
One other question on the first bullet point. We have another text amendment later on that we're going to be talking about that removes a setback from a property line to a residential structure. And I just want to clarify and reiterate, the way this reads is 400 feet from any lot or parcel with a residential building or active residential building permit. For abundance of clarity, if that adjacent lot that has that dwelling on it is 20 acres, then it is 400 feet from the closest edge of that property line with that dwelling on it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure we emphasize that.
Okay, so I'll continue with the presentation. As Jason stated, this next condition is already in the ordinance, and I'll just read it for everyone. Prior to any applicable planning commission meeting, the applicant shall conduct at least one public meeting in the election district in which the use is proposed. That meeting shall be held at a community center for that district or such other suitable facility within that district. That meeting shall be advertised once a week for at least 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation within the county. The first advertisement shall be no more than 30 days before the public meeting. Each meeting shall have a sign-in sheet where citizens may register. No person shall be required to register as a condition of admission. The applicant shall submit the sign-in sheet and minutes of the public meeting to the Planning Commission clerk at least 2 weeks prior to the Planning Commission meeting.
There's a question. What's the definition of applicable Planning Commission meeting?
That's the one where the project will be considered. So right now it's under detailed site plan, so it would be before it comes to you all to find that consistency.
Okay.
That it's that meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll move into reviewing the proposed conditions as the text amendment. So the first being no groundwater well shall be drilled or used to supply water for cooling or humidification. Water used by data centers shall be focused on efficiency, sustainability, and mitigation of negative impacts on public utility systems and ratepayers. This shall be demonstrated in Water Services Plan to be reviewed and approved by the Department of Planning and Zoning in consultation with the Department of Public Works and the Health Department where applicable. The Water Services Plan shall be prepared by a professional engineer licensed in the state of Maryland. The Water Services Plan shall be updated and reapproved prior to any material expansion or operational change that increases projected average daily cooling water demand by more than 10% over the approved plan. The Water Services Plan should describe how water will be used for cooling operations and impacts of not using water for cooling in summer conditions on peak power use efficiency and power demand. If a data center is designed to operate without the use of water for cooling, excluding domestic plumbing use, the applicant may satisfy this requirement by submitting a sealed certification to that effect in lieu of a full Water Services Plan. The Water Services Plan shall include, at a minimum, estimated average and peak daily water demand and annual demand, including demand attributable to cooling, estimated annual hours of evaporation, if applicable, identification of all proposed water supply sources and wastewater disposal methods, and a letter of availability capacity from the applicable water wastewater providers or agencies. Evaluation of feasible non-potable water sources which shall be used to the maximum extent practicable. A description of the proposed cooling systems and specific measures to minimize potable water use. Cooling systems serving the data center may utilize water evaporation for heat rejection, provided such systems are highly efficient systems. Inefficient evaporative systems such as continuous cooling towers or once-through cooling are prohibited. And proposed metering and annual reporting sufficient to measure total water use and cooling related water use. The applicant owner shall be responsible for the full cost of design, permitting, construction, and inspection of all on-site and off-site public infrastructure improvements required by applicable statute or regulation in order to serve the data center, including but not limited to water, wastewater, stormwater, and roadway improvement as set forth in the County Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance.
Questions here? Have a question on both stormwater and wastewater. Let's take stormwater first. As I understand it, the current stormwater mitigation design regs are based on state rather than county, correct?
That's correct.
And one of the criteria is the definition of a 100-year storm. And I know that there's been some discussion within the county about whether to increase the definition of what a 100-year storm looks like to tighten up the wastewater regs based on climate change. Is the county going forward with its own regulation to redefine that standard?
It's my understanding they are. I know Director Cosgrove has had those conversations with county leadership about putting that in place, and there is a plan to do that within a very near future. I'll put it that way, within the next few months.
Okay.
I think the question, and I've had some conversations with Director Cosgrove on it, and I don't want to speak for him. He's not here tonight, but the question at the moment is does that take effect on projects already in the system, or does that take effect on future projects? And I think that's the question that hasn't been fully answered.
That's where I was going with this, is grandfathering for any data center proposal.
I suspected that may be where you were going for it. So if part of any recommendation that comes from this body would be to make sure that any future project, such as data centers, would be included, wherever you have to stick that grandfathering to make that happen, in the more enhanced requirements, I think is a very reasonable request.
And then the question is the criteria site plan acceptance or site plan final approval? Right?
It's, so without going down a legal rabbit hole,
right.
It's what the enabling the enabling ordinance for the text amendment says it is. So as long the one area I would say that you would have a issue with that is if you have actual construction taking place.
Sure.
But if it's changing it mid-approval, I don't think legally that would be an issue if that is the purview of the BOCC to do.
Okay, so just flagging that as an issue for future county commissioner consideration. Then on wastewater, I understand that there is some potential that a data center could make use for cooling of wastewater coming from a wastewater treatment plant, like, for instance, the Solomon's plant. And that a design like that may possibly require some improvement to the wastewater treatment plant itself. And as I understand the amendment here, the cost for those improvements would incur to the data center company and not to the county. Is that?
I will say your example would be correct. This would apply to your example. Whether that's going to happen here, I don't want to speculate, but it would apply in a situation like that.
Okay. And under adequate public facilities ordinance, there is a sewer performance requirement. Do I read wastewater and sewer as synonymous here? So
this doesn't negate anything that's already in an adequate public facilities requirement. So if they have to meet something in the adequate public facilities ordinance, they would still have to meet it effectively regardless of that. So if that information's in there, they would.
The 80% requirement for sewer performance under APFO would apply to any wastewater treatment upgrades that might result from a data center.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Okay, we have one more condition left. All stationary diesel generators serving the data center's server rooms, including emergency standby generators, shall be certified to meet U.S. EPA Tier 4 final emissions standards or equivalent emissions performance, where such certification is available for the applicable engine size and class, and shall comply with all Maryland Department of the Environment air quality permitting requirements. Okay, so that concludes the proposed conditions for the data center use. We're also proposing an amendment to Section 30-2, permits and zoning approvals required. For any plan or application submittal, if the Department of Planning and Zoning determines that a third-party review is necessary to ensure compliance with applicable codes, regulations, and standards, such review will be required. The applicant shall be responsible for all associated costs in accordance with the approved fee schedule.
Can I circle back to the noise ordinance for a minute? I took a quick review of the existing county ordinance, which is virtually identical to the state ordinance, but it gives the county its own enforcement capability, even if the state for some reason were to drag its feet. So that's good. If a data center were to violate the county noise ordinance. But there's a potential issue that I wanted to flag in how noise is defined in that ordinance. It's for an industrial site like this, 75 decibels both day and night. Typically, there is a difference between broadband noise spread over broad frequency ranges, as you would get in a loud party or industrial sites or music performance. And some of the more specific low frequency noises that data centers can, in some instances, emit. And one of the issues that I think we should pursue and look at the best practices in science on is whether 75 decibels for very low frequencies that tend to propagate a lot over longer distances than higher and broadband noise does, whether that 75 decibel requirement is still adequate. And I think that probably best practices in science out there. So I wanted to flag that for future research. I know that there, in other localities, there have been complaints about constant low-level hums that may or may not reach that 75 decibel threshold. So just flagging that for future research.
We've made a note of that.
Thanks. All I have.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Next steps includes, so the BOCC is requesting Planning Commission feedback. Staff is requesting the Planning Commission review and discuss the proposal and email comments to staff by April 2nd. Staff will compile those comments and return to the Planning Commission at their April meeting for decision to forward to the Board of County Commissioners.
I do have a few questions.
We'd love to hear them, sir.
All right.
Yep.
Page 5, conditions for data centers. The first bullet point is no groundwater well shall be drilled. Help me understand why those two specific words are there. Is there another type of well, or is there another source for groundwater, or am I just reading too far into it? I'm being a little hesitant on all of this with the quickness that's being brought in. So if you could help me understand that sentence, I'd appreciate it.
I don't think there's any other way, any other type of well. I think that's just a descriptive. I guess in theory you could have, maybe I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but being from Texas, maybe you could have an oil well. But groundwater would be what we're discussing here. So
Okay.
that
I
would
didn't know
be.
if there was another type of well that could get water other than a groundwater well, or if that was referring to a deep well or a shallow well.
I don't think it specifies which type of well. It's simply use of groundwater. Now, whether you say groundwater and groundwater well, whether that's duplicative and saying the same thing twice, That's a valid point, but it's not meant to be anything other than use of groundwater for cooling.
Okay, so no use, so basically another way of saying that is no groundwater well shall be drilled, could also be, or it does say or used. So no groundwater is to be used, period.
Correct. And if
Okay.
we need to clarify that, we absolutely can.
Well, it does say shall be drilled or used.
Correct.
So that's why I was asking, because it's either duplicative in the same sentence, or there was something else going on there that I couldn't figure out. Bear with me just another moment. On page 8, when you talked about if there's a third party, this stipulates that the applicant would have to pay for the third-party approval process.
That's
or
correct.
third-party process. Who selects who that third party is?
So you'd have to go through it's an independent third party, so you have to go through the procurement
Okay,
process.
so
that we-
the applicant would not have a say in who that third-party person is. So they can't hire that third party.
That's correct. We use third-party reviewers now for things like towers and things that are outside of the purview of planning and zoning staff. So we have this authority now. We're just codifying it in the ordinance so there's no dispute if the issue was to come up. But that is, and we can clarify that in the ordinance, that it's not meant, they can't assign their own
I just
third-party
wanted to make
reviewer.
sure that they aren't checking the checker.
Understood.
Okay.
That's not the intent of that.
Right. All right. Some of the stuff in here seems oddly specific, and I'm wondering, was there a source for some of this information, or was this primarily drafted by somebody in planning and zoning? And has anyone from planning and zoning met with anyone from a data center company or someone representing a data center company to give them input as far as what a text amendment should look like or what their requirements would be?
So as for the drafting, we did look at several other counties. We're not unique in having these discussions about data centers. There's hundreds of these being proposed across the United States. So we really did a deep dive in looking at what other jurisdictions are doing, especially when it comes to water. There's a couple of counties in Virginia that we heavily copied. I'm not going to say we took it line for line, but we relied on. May not be any surprise. There's local jurisdictions in Arizona where water's a big issue that we pulled from, and we did compile that together in creating this. As for discussions with data centers themselves, they do know about these amendments, and we asked for feedback on it. I don't think they're necessarily happy with them, which is probably not a bad thing, but they're not the ones driving these amendments.
So none of these amendments were originated by the
Correct.
data center people in any way?
This did not originate from data center people at all.
Okay. Or their representatives?
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner? You settled?
On this one.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
Okay.
fine. You can keep going. We'll go all night
Yep.
long. That's why we're here, buddy. Anybody else?
Oh, I got plenty.
Okay,
So-
come on.
In relationship to anything in this county, how can our rules and regs meet it? Because we don't have anything like this in this county. So we've got a lot of notes here. I wrote the same notes. Everybody's talking about the same thing. So noise. Where has anybody gone out and measured noise? Why do we have already in here noise level, but I don't think anybody here has measured the noise inside a campus, not one data center, but multiple data centers. And when you look at multiple data centers and you're talking about the low hum, it's greater. So when I just, I think this is all cart before the horse. I mean, I have a hard time with practically everything I'm listening to because the research isn't really here. You're saying you're going to Northern Virginia, and then I go online to go look at research, and research goes a pretty far ways, and there's a lot of issues around noise. And I bring it up because it affects animals, It affects the kids. This is going to be near a middle school. It's going to be near a ball field. Okay? So when we looking at this entire thing, I have a problem even going through this early in the stage where supposedly we really don't have any plans to look at. Supposedly we don't understand how big it's going to be. And I am pretty sure it's a lot larger than we think, looking at some papers that Maryland has. So my tentative right now is, I just letting you know, I'm a voting no matter what.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen?
Yeah,
Anything else?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So I too have done a little bit of research looking at other jurisdictions' requirements for data centers, Florida, Georgia, Virginia. And I got to say, I believe that what's being proposed here is the most comprehensive environmental protective requirements of any jurisdiction that I have seen. I just want to compliment you on that. I think you've gone above and beyond to protect our environment.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Is that for now? Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
And just to follow up, if you guys have questions, if you can get it to us, and our feedback, additional feedback that you want us to compile, and we'll be back here next month. So this is
Right.
this is just the start of this conversation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are we done with this section? Okay, great. So now we have additional. Oh, there is a motion on this. I'm sorry.
If I may.
Please, sir.
What the Board of County Commissioners have asked isn't in the land use article or in the zoning ordinance. So I think to clean it up, but certainly within your purview as you're the subject matter expert on the comprehensive plan of Calvert County. To clean it up, we probably need a motion, at least endorsing the plan put out by staff. I've given an example of the motion, and obviously tweak it however you feel is appropriate.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You've lost me completely, sir. We're going to comment on this, us as a group, until April 2nd, correct?
Yes, sir. Well, assuming you approve staff's recommendation. Obviously, there is no authority binding you to do this. Accordingly, we need a motion from the commission itself saying, yes, this is the plan we're going to take.
I respectfully would have to disagree because the way I read this, this is information to us. We are asked to comment prior to April 2nd, and then it's going to be coming back to us at the April meeting for further discussion. My understanding was for any action or non-action at that point. I am absolutely unprepared to make any comment on any motion referencing this on less than 30 hours notice of getting this document.
I understand. The motion would merely be to set the procedure in place, not the comments themselves.
It sounds to me like the procedure's already in place.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're asking for a motion, because maybe you don't want the procedure. Maybe you want a different procedure.
If we do nothing, then it comes back to us next month. If you're saying we take action and say no to it tonight, then it fails. Is that what I'm understanding?
The county commissioners have asked for your input.
Right.
Now, if you say no, we're not going to give the input, then obviously the Board of County Commissioners can't force you to give input. We're trying to put a mechanism out here for you to get the comments back, the feedback that the Board of County Commissioners have asked for. The Board of County Commissioners recognize that this is you all are the subject matter experts for the comprehensive plan. They want your input on the proposed text amendments. Rather than, as with the rest of the text amendments, it just be placed for a public hearing. There is, because of all of the interest in data centers, the Board of County Commissioners want to hear your comments. Staff has outlined a procedure so that you could put your comments out. They would then, based on your comments, compile those comments, present it back to you at the next meeting for you to approve going forward to the Board of County Commissioners or not.
So the comments that you're referencing are really the discussion that we've just had over the last 10 or 15 minutes, correct?
Or
Right.
your further
Or whatever email,
research
yeah.
or thoughts over
Sure.
the next 2-week period.
Okay.
That way you're not bound to, okay, well, we got to give your comments right now.
Okay.
So is the motion that you're asking for just a motion that we're going to generate comments over the next 2 weeks?
Correct. That you generate comments over the next 2 weeks to staff. Staff then takes that, compiles it into a memorandum form, brings it back to you to approve for forwarding to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, and we're not recommending
Nothing at this point.
anything.
Not at this point, no, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move that we review that we further review the proposed text amendment and email comments to staff by April 2nd, and direct staff to compile the comments, including what was discussed here this evening, for our review at the April meeting.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Does anyone have a second? And we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
David.
Okay. Are there any against? It carries. Is that satisfactory, sir?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for all your help. We appreciate it.
Appreciate the diligent explanation.
Yes.
I'll try to be clear next time. I apologize.
No, you're clear. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move on to additional text amendments. And now we do have Rachel O'Shea and Beth Rimmer.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Beth Rimmer, the Zoning and Permitting Division Chief. We will now be reviewing the remainder of the proposed text amendments 2601 through 2606, 2608 through 2622, and 2624. As we get started, I'd like to discuss the background and purpose. A comprehensive rewrite and update of the zoning ordinance was adopted and came into effect March 1st, 2025, with additional text amendments adopted September 30th, 2025. Text amendments are being proposed to address recent changes made to state law as well as outstanding issues not addressed with the recent zoning ordinance update and text amendments. The proposed text amendment addressing data center conditions 2623 is still being considered by the Board of Calvert County Commissioners and was just covered in the previous session. I'm going to try to keep the text amendment review moving as there is a lot to cover. Please reserve your questions until the end.
So we can set the plate on this real quick, if you don't mind. So we will be going through all the text amendments, then going back to the beginning and dealing with each question of each text amendment individually, and then we will be having a vote. Are we going to be voting on these text amendments this evening?
No, there's no action required by the board on these amendments tonight. This is mainly just for information for you so that you're aware of them and that the next time you see them will most likely be in a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our first amendment, 2601. This is the amendment to bring the county in line with the recent updates to state forest conservation law. Before we get into what's changing in the law, first I want to be clear on what we're talking about. The forest conservation requirements essentially are trees that are required to be planted, preserved, or some combination of both for development projects on lots or parcels 40,000 square feet or greater, with some exceptions. So most of the changes we'll be discussing associated with this text amendment are part of the Senate Bill 526 passed in 2023 and which are required by the state to go into effect by July 1st of 2026. The most significant of which is a complete overhaul of the reforestation requirements so that going forward, required reforestation is set at 1 acre of forest planted for every acre of forest removed. There is an exception for priority funding areas that are not also identified as priority for retention. In those areas, required reforestation is set at ½ acre of forest planted for every acre of forest removed. And for the construction of multifamily housing consisting of a single structure containing at least 25 units, the required reforestation is set at ¼ acre of forest planted for every acre of forest removed. Essentially, this replaces the forest conservation threshold policy currently in place, where the reforestation ratio is set at 1/4 acre of forest planted for every acre removed until a certain percentage of forest on the site is removed, after which the ratio is flipped to 2 acres of forest planted for every acre removed. So in one sense, this new policy simplifies the reforestation ratio, 1 acre planted for every acre removed. That is something that everyone can easily understand. But in effect, and broadly speaking, this will result in a significant increase in the amount of reforestation required for development projects. Another change is in the scope of what is considered a priority for retention, which has been expanded. For example, forest suitable for interior dwelling species is now considered a priority for retention under the new regulations. According to mapping done by the state, this could include most of the forest in the county. In addition, any unforested riparian buffers on site are required to be forested. Solar energy generating systems are exempt from afforestation, but not from reforestation requirements. If clearing occurs in a priority retention area, public written comments must be allowed prior to approval. And if 75% or more of the priority retention area on a site is cleared, verbal comments must be allowed. And on this side, some additional new policies, the first two of which do not come from the state law. These are policies being proposed by the county. The first is that monument trees retained outside of designated forest retention area may be credited towards afforestation and reforestation requirements if the site has been designed to ensure long-term survival. In town centers, afforestation and reforestation requirements may be satisfied by the planting of individual trees. Individual trees and landscaped areas may be credited to meet up to 25% of afforestation and reforestation requirements. In town centers, planted green infrastructure or planted environmental site design practices beyond the amount required by the state may be granted full credit as a mitigation technique. These policies would both incentivize the preservation of larger historic trees on site and offer developers some flexibility on how to meet the stronger conservation requirements. Additionally, it is not in the text amendment. However, we are planning on including grandfathering language in the adopting resolution to make clear that these new regulations would only apply for new projects submitted after July 1st of 2026, and accepted projects currently in progress would still be held under the current regulations. The next text amendment, 2602, this amendment would exempt land owned or leased and developed by the county or Board of Education from the zoning ordinance unless state or federal law requires compliance. Board of Education properties are already exempt. The amendment just clarifies that. And this is a policy that is fairly common in other jurisdictions. For example, this policy is in place in Charles, Anne Arundel, and Prince George's County, to name a few, and it's something that would save the county both time and money. The next text amendment, 2603, removes tenant house as a separate use in the use article and use tables, and instead includes it within the definition of dwelling accessory to a residence. So going forward, the condition for dwelling accessory to a residence would be the conditions applied to tenant homes. And current conditions for tenant homes, such as counting tenant homes towards the permitted density of the property and the property consisting of a minimum of 25 acres, would no longer apply. Moving on to text amendment 2604, this amendment is to bring the county in line with the state's new accessory dwelling unit law. House Bill 1466 states that any local law requiring additional parking for accessory dwelling units shall provide a waiver process for the parking requirements. We currently require one off-street parking space for an accessory dwelling unit. The text amendment would add an exemption from our off-street parking requirements for dwellings accessory to a residence if sufficient areas exist to accommodate an on-street parking space. In the state's accessory dwelling unit policy task force final report, best practices section for parking requirements, one of its recommendations is to develop parking requirements for accessory dwelling units that consider or factor into decision-making whether sufficient curb exists to accommodate on-street parking. And we believe that the text drafted in this line with recommendations from the state's policy task force report best practices section for parking requirements. The next amendment, 2605, this would add retail accessory to the use tables and permit the use conditionally in the light industrial and mixed use district. It defines retail accessory as an establishment that provides physical goods, products, or merchandise directly to the consumer where goods are available for immediate purchase, which is incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the land or structure, with the condition that retail uses shall occupy no more than 25% of the net space a business occupies. And off-street parking would be required for the retail use for 25% of the net space the business occupies. Under the previous ordinance, a use called flex space was allowed, which permitted retail as an accessory use for up to 15% of the space a business occupied. That use was removed from the ordinance entirely during the zoning ordinance update due to issues with developments that were permitted under that use, particularly in regard to the parking. You might recall that we also received written comments from the Department of Economic Development towards the end of the zoning ordinance update process that requested we add accessory retail use specifically to address the loss of flex space in the I-1 district. They asked for a condition that the accessory retail use not exceed 15% of the total gross floor area for the principal building or 2,000 square feet, whichever is less. We are proposing 25% of the net space the business occupies exceeds what was originally requested. So introducing this retail accessory use and allowing it in the light industrial and mixed use district fills the vacuum caused by the removal of flex space and does so in a way that still addresses the parking. The next text amendment, 2606, proposes to remove provisions from the zoning ordinance regarding the location, review, and amendments of harbor lines. Harbor lines are the purview of state agencies such as the Maryland Department of the Environment and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the county does not have the authority to amend. And for those reasons, we don't believe including these provisions in the county zoning ordinance is appropriate. Text Amendment 2608 proposes some changes to the signs article. Some of these are just amendments clarifying existing policies, like that outside town centers only signs in the rural, commercial, and employment center districts need to comply with the appearance code of the nearest town center, and that the Planning Commission or its designee may grant approval of a master sign plan. There are two substantive changes proposed to this amendment. One is allowing home occupations one freestanding sign not to exceed 4 square feet in size and 6 square feet in height without requiring a sign permit. This is being proposed to streamline and simplify processes for reviewing and approving home occupations. The other is revising the setback requirement for electronic message centers from 200 feet from a residential property line to 200 feet from a residential dwelling. Not every parcel or lot is a neat square shape with a house in the middle. You'll often have odd-shaped parcels or parcels where a dwelling is far closer to one parcel line than the other. So you could have situations where a proposed EMC could be 100 feet from a residential property line, but 500 or more feet from the actual dwelling. This setback requirement is on top of screening requirements that electronic message centers be shielded from the view of residential structures on adjacent properties through a fence, wall, or vegetative buffer. So staff believes in this case that a setback requirement from the dwelling itself would be more sensible than a setback from the property line. Text Amendment 2609 revises sidewalk requirements so that in developments in the I-1 and I-2 districts may be exempted upon further request that includes justification that the development to be served would not require sidewalks in its day-to-day operation unless the proposed roads are a thoroughfare to residential development or public serving businesses or amenities. This requirement will not be waived if existing sidewalk infrastructure is present on adjacent lots or parcels. Currently, sidewalks are required along both sides of any proposed road. Text Amendment 2610 is a simple one. It revises the bike rack installation requirements so that they would only apply within town centers. Text Amendment 2611 restores the side and rear setback reduction policy to town centers, commercial and industrial districts, and non-residential development. Just to be clear, what this amendment is proposing is not new. It's proposing to reinstate the county's policy that was in place up until February of last year prior to the zoning ordinance update. This policy allows setbacks to be reduced to 0 feet for adjacent properties under the same ownership. And setbacks may also be reduced to 0 feet by the Planning Commission administrator or its designee if the adjoining property is zoned TC, EC, RC, NC, I-1, or I-2. If emergency vehicle access and maintenance are properly addressed and screening in accordance with landscaping requirements is determined to be adequate. And for clarification, this does not include uses that have setbacks specified as conditions. This is a policy that was removed from the draft zoning ordinance during the update, but one that staff believes should not have been removed from the ordinance. Text Amendment 2616 proposes to remove additional setback requirements for automobile filling station and automobile repair service shops. Currently, setbacks for automobile filling station requires that no building or structure be located within 80 feet of a parcel with a residential building or active residential building permit, and no variances to reduce these setbacks are permitted. In Lesbian Solomon's Town Center, the minimum setback is 150 feet, and in Owings Town Center, it is 150 feet if there is a convenience store or eating establishment. Current setbacks for automobile repair service shops require that no building or structure be located within 150 feet of a parcel with a residential building or active residential building permit, and no variances to reduce these setbacks are permitted, except in Prince Frederick Town Center, where the minimum setback is 80 feet. Setbacks requiring that no visible appliance for servicing automobiles, to include pumps, be located within 25 feet of the front line would remain. Staff believes these setbacks are too restrictive. To give an example, the automobile filling station and convenience store currently proposed to be remodeled and expanded in Owings Town Center is adjacent to 2 fairly large farm parcels. There are currently no residential dwellings on those properties, but if there had happened to be an old farmhouse on just one of those properties, these conditions would have potentially killed that project, or at least put it on hold until we were able to do a text amendment. In addition, if you look at other counties in the region, St. Mary's and Charles don't have increased setbacks specific to uses like automobile filling stations and convenience stores. Text Amendment 2613 revises buffer area requirements where a non-residential use is adjacent to an existing residentially used property, a property with an active residential building permit, or a property with a non-compatible use. In the zoning ordinance update, these buffer area requirements were increased from a minimum 20-foot width buffer and single row of canopy or evergreen and understory tree plantings to a minimum 40-foot width buffer with 2 staggered rows of evergreen tree plantings. This text amendment would limit the new 40-foot buffer requirements to uses like solar energy generating systems, commercial power generating systems, and data centers. Essentially, the staff has concerns that the expanded 40-foot buffer requirement will become an impediment for commercial development and want to and want to limit it to specific uses where it is justifiable. Text Amendment 2614 replaces the term gross floor area with the enclosed space when measuring square footage for residential and accessory structures. The definition of the term gross floor area doesn't include interior parking spaces or garages. And that can become an issue as a garage space is often converted into living space in the future with or without pulling permits. So essentially, it can become a way to get around maximum size restrictions for accessory structures. Staff believes the gross floor area is a more appropriate term for use for non-residential uses. Text Amendment 2615 revises conditions for manufactured homes. First, it clarifies that a manufactured home is permitted as an accessory dwelling to another manufactured home if it meets the conditions of dwelling accessory to a residence, which brings us into alignment with the new state accessory dwelling unit law, House Bill 1466. Secondly, it removes a condition that requires the exterior of the unit to have the appearance of wood or masonry, regardless of its actual composition. This kind of micromanaging of the wall types, staff doesn't believe is appropriate for the zoning ordinance. Text Amendment 2616 clarifies that food trucks shall not be located within any public right-of-way. Text Amendment 2617 is a minor revision to the definition of personal services. In the list of typical uses included within the definition, health club is replaced with personal training services. This is to clarify that something like Planet Fitness would not be considered a personal service. It would be considered an indoor commercial recreational facility, which has more appropriate parking requirements. Text Amendment 2618 restores a condition for office and medical offices in the Village District of St. Leonard Town Center that the combined gross floor area of the use is limited to 5,000 square feet. This is not a new condition. This was a condition that fell through the cracks during the zoning ordinance update, and with this text amendment, we're just inserting it back. Text Amendment 2619 clarifies that space shall be provided on the plat for signature and dates indicating certificate of approval of the chairman or secretary of the Planning Commission, as well as the property owner and all parties having proprietary interest in the property subdivided, which including required statement language as indicated on checklists provided by the Department of Planning and Zoning. Text Amendment 2620 clarifies that the Board of Appeals has the authority to hear and decide applications for special exceptions as indicated in the use tables of Article 18 or as expressly authorized in the zoning ordinance. In the case of decisions on alleged errors, it clarifies that the Board of Appeals cannot issue an order or determination that would require the exercise of administrative discretion not otherwise available to the zoning officer or other administrative official, and that in deciding an appeal, the board may only act within the scope of authority granted by the zoning ordinance and the Maryland land use article and shall limit its actions to the matters raised on the appeal. Text Amendment 2621 revises the applicability section for the site plans and plot plans. Currently, all farm buildings and any structures for commercial agritourism, ecotourism, and heritage tourism uses require a Category 2 site plan. The amendment would revise this so that farm buildings and other structures for commercial agritourism, ecotourism, and heritage tourism uses where the cumulative square footage of the use is equal to or more than 5,000 square feet would require a Category 2 site plan. But farm buildings and other structures for those uses where the cumulative square footage of the use is less than 5,000 square feet would only require a plot plan approval. The site plan process is longer with more steps and fees associated with it and is reviewed by more external and internal agencies. Site plans will also always require a licensed professional to work on the plans, whereas that is not always the case with a plot plan. And the reason 5,000 square feet was chosen as it is the threshold of disturbance that triggers stormwater management requirements. So the intention behind this amendment is to lessen the burden for farms that want to start smaller scale commercial agritourism, ecotourism, and heritage tourism businesses on their properties. Text Amendment 2622 adds a setback requirement for the dispensaries to the list of conditions for retail general. Dispensaries shall be set back a minimum of 100 feet from the following zoning districts: residential district, rural community district, rural neighborhood district, waterfront community district, and the farm and forest district. And the amendment is written so it's clear the setback applies to all infrastructure supporting the use, which would include parking areas. Dispensaries are currently permitted wherever retail general is permitted, which is in the rural commercial districts and town centers. And there are a number of setback requirements in the state law for dispensaries that we don't include in our ordinance, like 500 feet from a school and other setbacks, because they're applicable regardless. The state imposes limitations and conditions on the additional zoning regulations that local governments can enact for dispensaries, but this specific setback requirement is one they allow local governments to implement. Text Amendment 2624. And finally, per the BOCC directive, as staff also prepared Text Amendment 2624, which would allow up to 2 family conveyance lots per eligible parcel for a limited time. The policy would have a sunset date of 2 years following the adoption of the amendment. After the sunset date, no more than 1 family conveyance lot will be permitted. This is comparable with how exception lots were addressed, which sunset March 1st, 2027. This portion of the work session is for informational purposes, and staff will proceed with the public adoption process and schedule public hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of Calvert County Commissioners.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, we have any questions?
That was a lot. Thank you.
That was a lot. You must be exhausted. Sleep well tonight.
A couple just for
comments?
clarification.
Clarification?
Text Amendment 2608 on slide 10 talks about Planning Commission or its designee. Does that, not sure how that works. Does that mean in each instance we have the option to designate a designee, or is that a decision that we make once and say, Planning Commission Administrator is our designee for all future such questions?
We consider the Planning Commission Administrator the designee.
Okay, so the question is whether we want to give up that role ourselves or not, and I have no opinion on it. I just want to flag that as a question for all of us. Next question I have is on 2611, on setbacks reduced to 0 feet for adjacent properties under same ownership. Makes a lot of sense, but what happens if in the future one of those properties is sold to a new owner who then has a building in the adjacent property that has no setback? Does that emerge as a future problem and a non-conforming use?
It doesn't necessarily create a non-conforming use because at time of the site plan, when it's done, they would request the setback reduction, and
Right.
it would go on their site plan.
Okay.
And it would be approved that way. Yes, so that could happen in the future when then the property changes hands.
Okay.
But Mr. Burry, just for clarification, once again, Jason Brinkley, Director of Planning and Zoning, this is something that was under the old ordinance.
Sure.
And was actually taken out or wasn't included, I think more by error than by purpose. in the March adoption last year.
Yeah.
And I do remember having that conversation about that at that time, because I had that question as far as the same, almost the same question that was asked. And I'm going to double down on it at this point. If a building is built with 0-foot setback, the person has the adjacent property. Once he gets the approval, he sells the adjacent property. He gets to keep that building with 0-foot setback. So that's why I think maybe it was left out last time, not by accident, but on purpose.
There was no plans to take that out. I think Jason is correct, that it was accidentally taken out. That is a common practice in an industrial area, for those to allow for 0 setbacks, but before they are reduced, they are reviewed by agencies such as public safety and any other applicable agency for their review to ensure that for safety purposes that it is something that's allowable. Very seldom we reduce them down to 0. They may be down to maybe 3 feet, 5 feet, depending on what it is, but they can go down to 0.
But you said they rarely, if ever, do.
Very seldom.
So if they very seldom, if rarely ever do, why would we want to have the allowance to have it go down to 0?
That's the way it's written. They can go down to 0. Very
Okay.
seldom we have it axed to 0.
Back to you, Mr. Berry.
Any other comments?
Last comment is on text amendment 2613, where we're talking about limiting the new 40-foot buffer requirement to just solar energy stations, commercial power, and data centers. Great idea to have buffers, but for those uses, the question is whether there aren't other types of industrial uses that also would, which ought to have buffers like that. I don't know whether it's other permitted uses depending on the zoning area, things like sawmills, for instance, other industrial uses that may have noise or appearance problems that would benefit from a 40-foot buffer. So what I'm worried about is if we're just specifically talking about these 3 particular kinds of installations, but all others can get away with just a 20-foot buffer. So that's the issue that I'm flagging for future consideration.
And just to clarify, in the old ordinance, it was 20 foot. When we adopted the new
Okay.
ordinance in
Yeah.
2025,
Yeah.
we increased it, but feel increasing it for all uses is a bit restrictive. So we considered limiting it to a certain, those uses
Yeah.
where it was obvious that we would want an increased buffer.
Yeah, no, I I agree with data centers, commercial power, and solar energy. It's whether there are other facilities like that that also might the public might benefit from those better increased buffers. Something to think about for the future. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
2616, is there a definition of public right-of-way?
Mr. Freeland, there is a definition of public right-of-way, but for the purposes of this, there's actually a definition of food truck that might be more applicable, and I don't have that definition right in front of me, but essentially if it's given permission because of like a fair event or something of that nature, then it would be allowed in the public right-of-way because of that special nuance. But this is talking about in other instances than that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is a question that was posed earlier.
I wonder if it would be more appropriate to say public road right-of-way.
Very possible, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other opinions, comments?
Yes, please.
Questions? Please, sir.
All right. Going back to 2601, paragraph 2E, item double I, says both the grantor and the grantee used to say file a declaration of intent. That's been crossed out and it now says sign. Can you help me understand why we're telling them that they no longer have to file this, but just sign it? And then what do they do after they sign it? Do they then file it or just keep it for their copy? I'm not sure I understand what happens there.
We have that answer for you, Stacy.
Thank you.
God, I'm short. Colleen Brummett, environmental planner. I would have to go back and check, but it may be, a lot of this is very closely modeled after the state's model ordinance, and it may be a word that they changed that when we were moving language over might be the same. They have to submit it with us, so it does still get filed. But I would not know off the top of my head why we changed that specific word, other than
And
if the
I'm
state
not-
had changed it and we just went along.
Right. I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but I also
No,
know
that's
the
okay.
state makes mistakes also.
True.
And maybe sign and file might be appropriate as well.
Okay.
Because as it sounds, it's like, let's sign the document and then we get to leave everybody else out of it and we each keep a copy.
Yeah, they don't get approvals until they have actually submitted that as part of their
Okay.
project application.
Thank you.
Do others?
I'm working on it.
Oh, sure.
That one was already answered. Bear with me. $2605. You explained it pretty well, a lot better than what I was able to understand on paper. So I'm good with that. I have no other questions. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
No, I meant on
that.
On that one.
Feel free to move
Okay.
ahead.
2611. Mr. Bray brought that one up. That was zero setback. $2622. Dispensary, cannabis dispensaries. Just so I can understand, I'm going to plead my ignorance of the entire dispensary and cannabis, anything that's going on with that. So help educate me on what is the definition of a dispensary. I know it reads it here, but I see some places advertise that they're a dispensary and other places advertise, for lack of a better term, you can come by and buy your stuff. It seems like there's two different categories of sales of cannabis or CBD or XYZ, whatever the other letters are that explain this stuff.
So I'll do the best that I can because this is a state requirement, not a zoning ordinance requirement necessarily. But if it's a dispensary, it's got to be licensed by the state. And I think some of the others are maybe finding workarounds to provide similar substances that are regulated under the Farm Bill from 2021. I'm racking my brain here, that allows for what is essentially the difference between it's a verbiage difference that allowed some of that under a hemp exemption under the U.S. Farm Bill of, I think, 2021, 2020, somewhere in that range. It may even predated that. But I think that's where you're getting into what things that are called dispensaries and things that are not called dispensaries. For the purposes of this amendment, this regulates dispensaries to the maximum extent we are allowed to by law. So that we're by adding this provision. It's the only one we have any discretion on, and so we're asking to put that in place.
Okay, and I appreciate that. But my question then, my follow-up is, if you can go to two different types of stores and buy the same type of product that yields the same types of results, why wouldn't the same zoning or something apply to both?
Well, both of them would be retail, so it theoretically would, but how we categorize the non-dispensary use would be, we would have to have an entire definition for that, but that is a valid question that we can evaluate further.
I greatly appreciate that. And I appreciate the education because I know nothing about any of that.
I know a little bit about the law, but I don't know anything about the substance. So
Good
that's-
answer. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
sir.
got,
Thank you.
I got one.
Please.
So on back to 2613, the last text amendment, would limit the new 40-foot buffer requirement for energy, commercial power, and data centers. But yet, earlier on number 13 that we were talking about, you were looking at 200 and 400, right?
That's correct.
So why do we have this in here 40? I'm confused.
The difference between a buffer and a setback.
Yeah.
Correct. One's a buffer, one's a setback. So in addition to the setback, you would also have to have some sort of buffer of 40 feet.
So you got to have a tree
That would-
buffer, some buffer.
Some type
Within
of.
the
Is it
setback.
Within the setback.
Correct.
Correct.
Excellent.
Yeah, to figure
Set.
that one out this afternoon.
I did have one dog here that didn't get pulled up.
come on in.
All right, 2624. If this is the one I'm thinking it is, this was pretty contentious when it first came out. Can we go back over exactly what this is? So if, and again, I'm trying to remember which one it was, there was a text amendment that was presented a while back that, for lack of a better term, said if your farm had X many buildable lots on it that you can maintain for your family under previous agreements, we're going to go back on that and moving forward, we're going to only say you can have so many moving forward. Is that this text amendment or is this something different?
No, that's something different. That is the ag rules and regs that we were discussing last fall. And so that's different than this because that's specifically for APDs.
Okay.
And that's a separate item than this. This is, so under the update last year, we changed the number of family conveyance lots that you could potentially have, potentially being the key word, from 3 down to 1. And we've had a number of people that have come in since then that didn't know it changed. We effectively flipped the light switch. We didn't give any grace period on that. So this is putting that grace period effectively back in there because you had individuals that were planning on this, whether with their children or whatever, and they just simply weren't following along with the update, and then they come in April, June, July of last year and said, oh, I didn't know it changed. I had planned to have son or daughter or whoever on this property. This gives it some level of grace period that they can do that in. We came up with March 1st, 2027 in here. That it's effectively and we actually might change that based off of internal discussion to 28 or set a different timeline on it. The BOCC has requested that we may relook at that just because the adoption of this amendment takes time. But that allows some grace period for individuals that have those lots that are planned family conveyance lots to actually have time to come in and take care of it. The reason why staff, my understanding, the reason why staff requested that be taken out and was taken out is because it is subject to abuse. You could say, hey, this is for junior, and then 5-6 years later, you could sell that to whoever and essentially gain an extra lot. We have some protections in place about that, but that is always something to be concerned about. So that's why we're allowing some grace. We found this to be maybe the best way to weigh the two pros and cons of allowing it done.
So when did the light switch get turned off, as you put it, and how did it get turned off?
It got turned off in the adoption of the new ordinance, which took effect March 1st of last year.
Okay. When we put that, if and when we put that back into place, because I personally think that it should be in place, but without a grandfathering or a sunset. We've always sat there and said, well, I shouldn't say we, but many people in the county have said, we need to have places in this county, dwellings that our kids can sit there and afford and buy and live in and everything else. And with that came the proliferation of condominiums, townhouses, and apartments all in our towns and cities. And lo and behold, less than 2% are occupied by originally Calvert County residents. That 2% is an educated guess, and I'm going to have data on that to back it up soon. But all these apartments and townhouses and everything else are being purchased by people moving into the county. So I don't know how those are helping our kids, and as you put, Junior moving into the house on the farm. I don't see how any of this extra development is helping. So personally, I think we need to look back at farms and say, okay, if Junior does want to have a place there, give him the place. If Junior decides to move out of the area in 7 years, that's their business. You know, that my 2 cents.
And that can definitely be a recommendation from the Planning Commission that simply that be included, but without the sunset provision.
Right. I mean, I'm totally against, if that's what this is putting that back in, I'm against the sunset provision on it. If we're going to put it back in, let's put it back in.
Understood.
Thank you.
Jason, question. The March 1st, is that applied for or completed and occupied?
Applied for.
Okay.
Gentlemen, any other questions or comments? Wonderful. Ladies, thank you so much for your help today. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Commissioners.
A lot of material.
Hey, Rachel, can you hand me the clicker? Okay, with that being said, we're going to move to number 11, items of interest. Jason, do you have anything, any updates in the legislative session?
I do. Let me get to that real quick. So last month, members, if you remember last month, I updated the Planning Commission on some legislation going through Annapolis. I think I flagged 7 bills, which it's actually a number of them are cross-filed. One of them is HB 239, which has a cross-file of SB 360. That is the Starter and Silver Homes Act of 2026. The BOCC has sent in a letter in opposition to that. If you recall, that could have substantial impacts on Calvert County in the amount of density we would be required to allow. There has been 14 amendments that have been proposed by the author. At the moment, that bill is still pending in committee. Those 14 amendments clarify some of the issues, but it would still allow the quite a substantial increase in allowed density, specifically in the town centers or areas that potentially would be served by water and sewer within a 5-year period. There's still a lot of concern on that bill. I know that's a bill that many in the community have voiced their concern on as well. The next is HB 548, which has the cross-file with SB 325. That is the Maryland Housing Certainty Act. The Board of County Commissioners also sent in a letter in opposition to that bill. That bill actually cleared the, I think on the Senate side, cleared the committee earlier, I think on Monday. It did have some amendments that clarified exactly what it's talking about. Effectively, the only thing how it would affect Calvert County now, it was increase the tolling of a project from 3 years to 5 years. Like I said, there was a letter sent in opposition to that bill. And then the other one I brought up was HB 778, which is the Middle Housing Options Bill. That was a letter in opposition sent to that bill too. It's similar to the first bill that I referenced, in that it would substantially override the comprehensive plan, but it would also have substantial increases to allowable density. There is no Senate counterpart to that, and what I'm hearing is it looks like that bill doesn't have a lot of traction. It would be the Silver and Starters Home Act bill that has probably the most traction out of the ones I've listed here. But I wanted to bring that to y'all's attention because those were the bills I brought up last month, and give you that feedback.
Thank you, sir.
So the first bill that you mentioned, as I understand it, the sponsor included in his suggested amendments that county adequate public facilities ordinances still stand and cannot be overridden. So that at least gives us in the county some control over density, but not as much as previously.
Correct. I think the amendments are a step in a positive direction. I guess if you could say positive is in not allowing substantial development, but it still would have a substantial impact on Calvert County.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anything else? Nope. Okay.
We're all
We'll
set.
we'll move on to B. Yes, I was made aware that you wanted to learn more about the new development review process that became effective March 2025 with the updated Calvert County zoning ordinance. So I'm here today to give you a brief overview. And if you have any questions at the end, either myself or Tamara Blake Wallace can answer your questions. And so what we have here on slide 1 is that as of November 10th, 2025, all new planning applications, which were like site plans, subdivision, administrative plats, they were to be submitted electronically via the Encompass portal. And once basic information is provided via the portal, a project number will be assigned to the project. Site plans, subdivision, administrative plats prior to the state remain under the prior review process until completed and do not roll over to the new portal guidelines. The new process has several advantages, which I'll discuss in this slideshow, but one advantage is that these projects can now be submitted at any time for review and do not have to wait for the technical evaluation group or subdivision evaluation group meeting for acceptance. So subdivisions now follow similar paths with different terminology, but both utilize a 3-step process which guides projects beginning with concept submittal and follows the project through until it has reached the final approval. Step 1 is the concept phase. The old process required a full agency review and conditional approval from the Planning Commission, yourselves, whereas now the new process has a limited agency review. However, stormwater management requires a full approval in step 1. Now, step 2 is the detailed preliminary phase. The old process allowed for revisions and additional review during this phase. However, in the new process, a full agency review as well as revisions are required of site plans and major subdivisions in order for the project to go in front of the Planning Commission for review and approval. If the project is a major subdivision in Tier 3, it will require a Planning Commission public hearing prior to presentation at the Planning Commission meeting. The change in this process allows for the Planning Commission to yourselves to review a more detailed and developed site plan than what we had in the earlier phase. Now, step 3 is the final approval. This stage remains the same in both the old and new process. In this stage, the final site plan and the final plat are approved, and of course the Planning Commission must certify a plat prior to recordation. Okay, now the processes, I have some charts here. I'm not going to go through every little line and everything, but I'm just going to kind of briefly cover this. Now, the charts depicting the 3 steps of the site plan and subdivision process can be found on the following slides. And so you can review it. Let's see, you have it here in your notes to review, and is also on the Planning and Zoning website for the public to review because I know the letters are small and you maybe can't read it all. Now, each step and project type has a checklist that lists required supporting documents, and a project size and complexity determines its category, such as a detailed site development plan or a category 1 or 2 site plan, a major subdivision, minor subdivision, or an administrative plat. Now, the category determines applicable fees and whether the Planning Commission approval is necessary. And then also on these where you'll see the stars, that's kind of where the change has been between the earlier phase and the new phase process. And so as you can see here, this here is a step 1, let's see, I'm sorry, on the processes. Okay, As you can see here in a Step 1 concept plan, the application may then be submitted by clicking on the assigned number and providing the required detailed information in the portal. And the system will indicate what documentation to upload as well as the fees currently due for the submittal. And if the submittal is incomplete, missing documents or fees, staff may return to the submittal to the applicant during the intake review. And notification will be sent to the applicant via email through the portal advising what additional information needs to be provided so that the project can be moved forward. And so the site plan 3-step process is similar to the subdivision 3-step process. And you'll see in the second step follows the same timeline for intake review and the review cycles as in step 1. The detailed site development plan or the preliminary subdivision plan must be accepted for review, and the information must be complete with fees paid within 12 months of receiving its approval to move forward under step 1. Detailed site development plan projects will expire in 24 months after it's been accepted after step 2, unless a final approval is granted. And step 2 requires much more detail and as such may require multiple divisions and review cycles. Now we also have here the combined site plan and subdivision 3-step process. Again, basically the same steps. After steps 1, 2, and 3 are approved, the Planning Commission must certify the plat prior to recordation for major subdivisions. And final plat and recordation package processing is accomplished through the Planning Commission clerk. And then administrative plats are also handled by the Planning Commission clerk. Now, when both site plan and subdivision approval are required, they are combined into one joint application and reviewed simultaneously, and a site plan cannot be reviewed prior to submission of a subdivision. And then we have the various review cycles, and again, we have all the different agencies that review it. Comments are issued. This is just kind of the cycle. The applicant will revise plans and they'll resubmit it again back to us through the portal, like I mentioned earlier. There'll be another review cycle. Reviews will continue until the project reaches its final approval. And that is a brief review. And then for some levity here, we have the Planning Commission superheroes of Calvert County. Do you have any questions on this process?
Gentlemen, questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay. If you go back to any one of those colored flow charts, on the far right there is a blue box that says addressing. What does addressing mean?
I believe that means that it's addressing the comments,
So
correct?
when, no. So
Okay.
when we get a plan in, whether it's site plan or subdivision, it goes through public safety so that addresses are assigned for 911 purposes.
Oh, okay. The other thing is, there is a final Planning Commission review process that the view graphs refer to as plat certification. That includes both a final determination by the Planning Commission of consistency with the comprehensive plan and a review of whether it conforms to all applicable state and local regulations as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You're all set,
Yeah.
Commissioner? Commissioner?
Page 3, if I could, please.
Oh, you want me to go back?
Yes, please. And I promise, Mr. Brinkley, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I just need to ask this. Page 3, one more. All right, it says in the old process, step 1 is full agency review and PC conditional approval. Under the new, it says step 1, concept phase, limited agency review and comments. And like I said, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but because the word comments is in there, does that mean that we can now anticipate that the agency reviews are actually going to supply us comments instead of what we see a lot of times in the past, them say, no comment.
So what has happened here, when you saw in the old process, when you saw them, you were getting a concept plan, basically. And you all stressed that you wanted to see a more complete plan. So we've moved it so that the concept is basically stormwater management. They go into their detailed site plan. This goes back almost to the process before the one we had, where you all were seeing a plan where most of the comments at that point there were very little comments, because we've got them to a point where they had addressed most of those comments. So when you're seeing it, that plan is basically almost finished at this point. And those agency comments at that last step, if you'd like for them to be included, usually staff summarizes those in their staff letter. But that is completely up to you whether or not you want to see all comments. Not all comments are applicable, but we do highlight the major comments if there are any at the end of that project.
Okay. And the reason why I bring it up is there's been plenty of times in the past couple of years that plans come to us, and when we look at agency comments, we have one or maybe two or...
That's because it's at concept, and not everybody would respond at concept. So
Right.
this was per your request of wanting to see a more baked plan down the road than seeing a concept, and then it's going through all the agency reviews and it doesn't come back.
Right.
So now we're going through all of those cycles. We've gone through concept, we're going through detailed. So you'll see it just before, once we get to a point where we're saying, okay, you have enough information, your comments have been addressed enough for us to bring it to Planning Commission. So you're seeing it, once you all see it and approve it, then it's basically, we're cleaning up that plan for them to get their approval.
All right. And also, when it comes to agency comments, I'm hoping that they will be limited to county government agencies, not outside businesses and nonprofits or other people.
The comments are going to be from the review agencies.
Okay.
So you will get outside review agencies such as SHA, SMECO, BG&E.
Okay. And I understand
so
those.
are the regular review.
Okay. But Better Business Bureau.
I'm sorry?
Better Business Bureau. Or trying to remember, we had one last year where comments came in, and it was really obscure that we had comments coming in from outside agencies that I didn't think really had anything to do with county governance or directly tied to it. So that's why I was asking about where those comments would be coming from, the agency
They're
comments.
coming from review agencies,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
One last question. So the new plan submission software, is that access available to members of the Planning Commission? Okay, and is it also access available to members of the public?
Yes.
Okay,
Are you talking about the actual portal itself, or?
yeah,
So the portal is open for submission.
right.
Now, as far as going in and seeing where it is in the process or whatnot,
Yeah.
you would have to literally have some type of, either you're the person in the portal doing it,
Okay.
or it's staff that has access to that portal.
That's my question, is whether, for instance, in the preliminary stage, members of the public or even members of the Planning Commission can take a look at what's going on.
So once it's submitted, it is public information,
Okay,
so it is available by PIA request.
okay. And this particularly would pertain to a data center preliminary submission of a plan, that even before it comes up to the formal review stage of the Planning Commission, we get a look at the conceptual plans just to start thinking about what the issues might be, correct? And the public would have that visibility as well.
Well, you wouldn't, right now, the way this process is set up, you would not see it until it's gone through too detailed. You would see if you requested to see it,
Right.
that concept, then that would be something that we could accommodate.
Okay.
So.
Would that be something that members of the public under Maryland Public Information Act would also be able to get access to?
Yes, the county website has a PIA request
Okay.
form that they could put it in through PIA request.
Thanks.
And Tamara, just for clarification, I just remembered the thought that I had from a year or two back was one agency made a comment, only one agency made a comment on a particular item, and we received a comment that was admitted in, not under public comment, but under agency comment from Chamber of Commerce. And I didn't know if Chamber of Commerce was going to be considered an agency of the county government.
Not for this review. I
Right.
think what you're thinking of is something that maybe had a public hearing, like a text amendment or something like that, because we send it out for agency. Those things go out for agency review.
Okay.
And they are part of the agency review for text amendments and
Got
things
it.
of that nature, not for site plan and subdivision
Okay.
review.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You set?
Thank you. Good, okay.
Thank you so much.
And then moving to C, you did receive site plan and subdivision list. Do you have any questions about any of those? No? Okay, so then we would move on to public comment, and planning commissioners will accommodate public comment in person, by telephone, or virtually. Speakers, whether in person or participating by telephone or virtually, will be limited to 2 minutes as individuals, or 5 minutes if the designated representative is part of a group or organization.
No.
Okay. So yes, and make sure to please state your name and if you're representing an organization.
Okay, my name is Bob Estes, and I'm just myself tonight. And I'm going way back because I didn't write enough notes and I've gotten a little fuzzy. But there was a point where you were going to have 2 weekly announcements. I believe it was for public information. Does that sound about right or familiar? No?
Not sure.
Well,
what you're
anyway, you were
thinking.
going to announce it in the paper 2 separate weeks. And I'm wondering, is that really the best way to get the local people's attention? I mean, I like the paper, I read the paper, but.
Are you talking about for the data center public meeting?
Yeah.
That's the requirement for the data center public meetings.
Right. I just didn't, I didn't realize it was going to be so long before we got into that. But I would say that in modern times, there are various different ways of attracting the public to that, and then they don't end up, mad because they don't read the paper, that you know how that works. So maybe consider something like that that's a little more than just the paper. Sorry, the paper's good, but anyway, and also
Marty heard.
Regarding the stormwater rainfall values, what the last I heard from JR is they're increasing it by 30%, which is good in some cases and not as good in others. I went ahead and did my 7,200 lines of local data. It's not good for 100-year because we don't have 100 years worth of data, but I'm still working on getting that to DPW. I'm hoping they thought they were going to be able to do that during this month. I don't know where they are. They don't generally tell me, but anyway, that's a little clarification, unless that's
15
changed.
seconds.
What's that?
15 seconds.
15. Oh, okay. Well, that's all I have to say. So there.
Thank you, Mr. Estes.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Baton. I'm speaking for myself, and so it's a 2-minute thing. As I understand what we're doing here with text amendments for the DPC is kind of setting the table for what's going to be okay with us. So I would hope that we look into light pollution and how it affects bird migration and stuff, because this is going to be right on the Chesapeake Bay. I'd like to find a way to encourage liquid cooling rather than evaporation cooling. Evaporation cooling is going to use water, and has some inefficiency in a humid climate like what we have here. Liquid cooling is more expensive to do, but it has less pollution associated with it and less other concerns. I think it would be good to have a bond or some sort of financial requirement for decommissioning the DPC when the time comes, to restore the environment to its pre-DPC condition. I think that would be important. And I think I had one more thing for just a second. Let me find it where I wrote it down. Light pollution, evaporative cooling, decommissioning, a bond to cover. Oh, thermal pollution of the Chesapeake Bay. So if they're drawing water out of the bay, they're sending hot water back in. Right. I definitely think that they need to meet Maryland Department of Environmental requirements, and that they shouldn't be given an exception because there's such a great resource of finances to destroy our water life in the bay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. We appreciate your help.
Good ideas.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Susan DeZurek. I'll be speaking for myself, and I live in Huntingtown. And let me adjust this for real quick so I can see it. And of course it isn't turning. There it is. Tonight I came into the possession of an application to MDE by the application is addressed to Mr. Jake Holness, Regulatory Service Coordination Office, Maryland Department of the Environment, Water Management Administration, Non-Tidal Wetlands, and Waterways Division. The Calvert County Data Center Project. Dear Mr. Holness, please find enclosed 7 copies of the completed application package requesting authorization to impact jurisdictional areas during the construction of the proposed Calvert County Data Center project. The project includes the construction of 3 campuses with a total of 7 buildings, totaling 225,000 square feet and 500 megawatts of data capacity. Utilities, stormwater management, road, bridges, parking lots, and pedestrian walkways. The project will be built and operated by Minute Developers, LLC, and will be on the Constellation Energy property of the nuclear power plant. Gentlemen, you got a 5-alarm fire, and tonight you brought a garden hose to deal with it. So I would suggest that this county go back to the drawing board and get yourself a really good consultant.
10 seconds.
And I actually happened to speak with one this evening, and I will get you that information. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I got all that data.
Oh.
It's been published.
That was August 25th of 2025.
Yep.
Is when that was.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Miriam Gohl. I know some of you. I used to work for Planning and Zoning long time ago. I am very concerned. Well, first of all, I wanted to know, why are we proposing zoning regulation amendments if the commissioners have called for a moratorium? I don't understand that. The regulations that they're proposing tonight, am I allowed to ask a question of Jason or no? If they're proposing, if they're not allowing a well on site, but they're making them hook into our water system, it's the same water, right? I don't see where that helps any. There are a lot of other issues that should be addressed. requiring that the buildings recycle their water, and Amazon's website actually says that that's what they do. Require all buildings to be LEED certified, require solar power, require strict compliance with critical area wetlands, stormwater management, and stream buffer regulations, require strict compliance with the county's noise ordinance, require mitigation for the mass amounts of impervious surfaces proposed, require green roofs and rainwater retention systems, require emission capture and control systems, and require air quality monitoring on-site and in surrounding residential areas. I sent this in, and Jason assured me that he will send this to you. There are a lot of other regulations out there. There's no need to reinvent the wheel on this. A lot of jurisdictions are addressing this issue. If you just Google green data centers, you'll see what innovative ways other jurisdictions are addressing these issues. So I hope the commissioners put a moratorium on it, and I hope the brakes are pumped to really study this, because it's a huge, like Sue said, it's a huge issue. It's going to have major impacts on this county, and just the regulations that are proposed this evening don't cut it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience?
Yes. I'll piggyback on that. Thank you, ladies. Okay, so my name is Ernest Shiflett. I'm a lifelong county resident. My wife and I purchased a lot adjacent to Calvert property that was zoned Farm and Forest District in 2015. When deciding to build a house on this property, we reviewed the county comprehensive plan, and this area was considered a preservation area. The zoning changes that took place in 2025 rezoned the 726-acre parcel adjacent to our property from Farm and Forest District to heavy industrial. I do not believe a 400-foot setback is adequate, considering this area was Farm and Forest District when everyone built or bought their home in this area. The MD permit application that the other lady spoke about has a map that shows the affected area as backing to homes on Nursery Road, H.E. Truman, and Camp Canoy. Calvert Cliff site consists of 2,000 acres. I believe a larger setback is needed to protect the residents currently living in this area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak?
I do think we have somebody online.
Yes, we do. We have one person online. Mr. Cormier, if you would like to unmute.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joseph Cormier, and I'll be speaking on behalf of myself today. I want to thank the planning commissioners for being here so late tonight. I want to thank staff for all their time putting into the presentations tonight. I want to thank the two candidates for county commissioner who were in the audience, unlike our 5 sitting commissioners. I'm concerned by a lot of things tonight. One thing that pops up was when Mr. Brinkley said that the text amendments were sent to AWS for their feedback. Was that before it was sent to the public for their feedback first? I don't think it's right to let the foxes design the hen house. We need not just these text amendments and regulations, but there needs to be teeth behind it. It can't just be a 6-month temporary use and occupancy permit given 4 times. It needs to be a complete stop work order when these are violated. We've talked a lot about water coming in, pulling from the well. I haven't heard anything about water coming out and how you're going to regulate that coming out. The water is going to be treated with, anti-corrosives, and it's going to pick up heavy metals. How are we going to deal with all that stuff? And I know we're going to have meetings in the district where it affects, but the bay and our aquifers don't care about district borders. We all pull from the same water. We all enjoy the same coastline. We talked about noise ordinances, but there's a difference between a party on a Saturday night at Harrington Harbor and a 24/7 constant drone of diesel generators running. And I think that there's a lot of science behind the EMF, electromagnetic frequencies that are coming off of these high intensity data centers that is going to affect our community and our wildlife. And I think that we need to pump the brakes and get out of these NDAs and bring transparency back to this process, because we can't let these billion-dollar multinational companies come in here and run over us and ruin our country and our county. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Is there anyone else online who wishes to speak? We have no more speakers.
Thank you so much. In that case, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a pleasant